is 126, 126. I read it earlier from the NIV, and I want to read it from the Message because Eugene Peterson just put it in modern day language like I've never heard before. And he was a pastor's pastor, and he wanted people to really know and experience the Word of God. Hope I can do it justice. So here's 126 from the Message. It seemed like a dream too good to be true when God returned Zion's exiles. We laughed, we sang, we couldn't believe our good fortune. We were the talk of the nations. God was wonderful to them, they said. God was wonderful to us. We are one happy people. And now, God, do it again. Bring rains to our drought-stricken lives so those who plant their crops in despair will shout yes at the harvest. So those who went off with heavy hearts will come home laughing with armloads of blessings. What a beautiful, beautiful text. And I love it from the Message. The Message isn't a great study Bible, but it is a great Bible to read your daily devotions out of and to assist you in understanding, particularly some of the things that might be older words. He will put them in modern day language. So I've got a hymn up here we're not going to sing until the end. It's called Bringing in the Sheaves. And if you grew up Baptist, it was a standard in the Baptist hymnal. And if you haven't heard it, you'll get it. But it's got a hymn story. Barb. It's written by Knowles Shaw. And it's based on Psalm 126. When Knowles was about 12, his dying father gave him his cherished violin and told him to live for the Lord. The boy grew up to become a singing evangelist who led 11,000 souls to Christ. His singing brought in the crowds and his preaching converted them. In 1878, while traveling by rail across Texas, he told a friend he never became discouraged, for he loved his work and had confidence in the gospel's power. Moments later, the train careened off the tracks and Shaw was killed in the wreck. His last words were, "It's a grand thing to rally people to the cross of Christ." It's awesome to know the stories behind these hymns. We're going to sing this at the end, but for now, we're going to talk about the psalm. Now, in case you don't, sheaves is an old word. I looked it up to find an actual definition, and it's got a couple meanings. It's part of a pulley. But the other definition is a gathering of crops or grain and put into one of those. Okay? Those are sheaves. That's how people, before there was machinery, harvested. And they put it in the sheaves and they carried it in. So that's the concept of what we're talking about today. So the psalmist is writing about what God has done for them. Now, he's speaking on behalf of the Israelite children, the Jewish people. They have been in captivity in Babylon, and they are free, and they are coming back to Jerusalem, and they're singing. This is actually a song. This is their version of a praise chorus. And so they're singing it. It's called a pilgrim song and a song of ascent. So they sing it as they're walking up to the temple. And the words are so meaningful to them, but to us today, about our relationship with God. And in verses 1 through 3, it talks about how God has been faithful in the past. We were like men who dreamed, it says. Our mouths were filled with laughter and our tongues with songs of joy. We were talked about by other nations about how the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. The Jews were free, they were able to travel, and it seemed too good to be true. And at that point, usually in a psalm, especially the longer psalms, there's this word, Selah, Selah, and it just means pause. Pause and take it in. Now, the guy that I was reading about the commentary for this suggested that even though there isn't a Selah in this psalm, that between verses 3 and 4, there is a big shift. There's a shift in the whole tone of the song because it goes from past to present. There's a pause. And sometimes there can be a lot of stuff in the pauses or in the in-betweens. Have you ever seen the poem, I don't have it, but what are you going to do in the dash? If you live from 1932 to 2022, all you really have is the dash. You know, the pause, the in-between time. And so the writer suggested that the psalmist is doing a little self-evaluation about their spiritual condition. He suggested that, well, in the very next verse, he asked that God would restore their fortunes like the streams in Negev. And I think he means more than just physical fortunes. I think he's asking for spiritual replenishment. Now, I think in this translation, it says streams in the south. Negev was in the south. It was a very desert area, dry area, and there would be times in the year where the rains would come and give the land that drink of water that it needed and it was so desperate for. And so the commentator says that he suggests that the Israelites maybe had forgotten to give thanks. They had been at a point between these two in this pause where maybe they had drifted away from what God wanted and from God's heart. And he suggests that we have to start looking to the future and not get hung up in the past. There is a clear shift. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like streams in Negev, and then those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. Oh my goodness, we are a people that love to get hung up in the past. We almost sometimes, I think back and I maybe I make it bigger than it is, or you have to be careful about romanticizing the past. And it's been good, or maybe it was great, but it can also be like sandbags around your ankles if you idealize the past too much. I am sure you've heard people talk about, wow, do you remember when we opened the doors and the church was full and we had to bring out folding chairs? Oh, that's great. Or remember when we did this, or remember when our family did this? That's great. But what about now? Do you allow the past to take away your future story? Or to cause you to think that maybe God is done and that the best is behind you? That is not the case. God is still on his throne. God is still working in his people. God is still doing miracles if we will look. God still has a definite future and a promise and a hope. It's all through Scripture. Now, before COVID, things were different. We've come out and it's almost like we're suffering from PTSD in a lot of ways. maybe depression. There are overwhelming people in need of mental health. We realized how much isolation can hurt a person. We realized we need each other. At the same time, it's really good that we developed Zoom and we kept in touch. But on the other side, please God, let us be on the other side. We are at a place where we have to stop talking about when they come back to church and start moving forward and figuring out who's going to come new. Read an article last week that says something to this effect: everybody that's coming back has come back. Because during COVID, people took the opportunity to go somewhere else, or they got out of the habit and it's not a priority anymore, or they're, for whatever reason, afraid to come back because of the germs and potential COVID, or they like staying at home and watching church on TV. They say that if you are at 3/4 of your worship attendance before COVID, then you've done really well. And that most small churches have done a lot better than big churches, because we already had that family feeling. We run about 30 every week, and our high for 2019 was 41. Our average was 41. So we're about, 3/4 of, so we continue to look back and invite the people that were with us before, but many of them have moved on, and now we move forward. We think about the people we've yet to reach, not forsaking our past, not stopping loving anybody that's not with us anymore. We do, and we want them, but we have to realize that this is a new beginning. And the way of playing the game is a little different. And we're figuring it out as we go. Do you think those are fair statements? I think they're fair statements. And this psalmist kind of was in the same place. And so that last half of this psalm was all about what God is going to do now. What is our purpose now? And by the way, we gained some awesome people through COVID and during COVID, and had some people rejoin us. So I know that whenever you have a group that you love, you want to keep them all together, and you want people to be the same. But man, if there's anything that's fluid, it's church attendance. It is fluid. At any given point in time, it's going to be changing all the time. Jeff and I went down to First Baptist, our home church, Friday night for a mission trivia thing, and I didn't recognize most of the people. It's changed. They have a different pastor. They have survived COVID, and it's a different group of people. And for those of you who really like to keep things nice and the same, I'm sorry. Let's learn to embrace change and newness and a new mission, and that God has a future for Garden Baptist Church, and we just have to be in tune with His Spirit to figure out what it is, where we spend our money, what we do with our time and our talent and our treasure. Kind of got off a little bit there. There is, in general, always a struggle in the church for, people looking for what they don't have. Some people are looking for a Walmart church where they can get something for every age group. Some people want to go to a big church where they can be anonymous. So what do we have to offer? We have this extended family, this group where you are known. And there are people out there who want to be known. You can be known here. You can't hide here. like you can at some churches. And the past is wonderful. It's something that we need to learn from. But this commentator said, past-thinking churches raise monuments. Forward-thinking churches raise missionaries. And you are all missionaries. What a fine line we walk as we journey into the future. Past-thinking churches raise monuments. Forward-thinking churches raise missionaries. What does that mean? Trying to put that in practical terms, we value evangelism. We value introducing people to Christ. We value finding what our niche is. And so then the last half of this is a whole look at planting and harvesting. That's what they did. They were agrarians, so this is a very easy thing for them to relate to, and us. We may be a couple generations away from all of us having family farms, but we garden, and we know about these things. So we understand the idea of sowing seed and reaping. But there is a phrase that I just want to take a look at closer. It says, this is in verse 6, though one goes along weeping, carrying the bag of seed, he will surely come back with shouts of joy, carrying his sheaves. Weeping. Weeping. Why did the psalmist say that? Let me tell you about a missionary, an evangelist missionary named Del Tar, Pentecostal. He grew up in parsonages or church housing in Minnesota and South Dakota, and most of his friends lived on farms. But he said, I never once saw my friends that farmed crying over their seeds. He was perplexed by that verse in Psalm 121. Why did the sower go forth with weeping? When he served in the Sahara Desert in West Africa, where the climate is similar to that of Bible lands, the rainfall comes in May and August through August, and the other 8 months are bitterly hot and bone dry. No farming is possible in those 8 months. Everything must be grown May through August. In the fall, granaries are full, and so are stomachs. The people seem happy. Their lives overflowing in song and dance and fellowship. By December, supplies begin to recede, and families begin eating but one meal a day. By February, people feel hungry. By March, food is rationed to 1/2 meal a day, and the children cry from hunger. April is the month that haunts his memory, he says. The dust filters down the air, and sound carries for long distances because it's so dry. April is the month you hear the babies stop crying at twilight. Their mother's milk is now stopped. This inevitably happens. A 6 or 7-year-old boy comes running to his father one day with sudden excitement. Daddy, Daddy, we've got grain. Out in the hut where we keep the goats, there's a leather sack hanging on the wall. Daddy, there's grain in there. The father, motionless, son, we can't do that, he softly explains. That's next year's seed grain. It's the only thing between us and starvation. We're waiting for the rains, and then we must use it. Instead of feeding his desperately weakened family, he goes to the field, and he says he's seen this. Tears streaming down the sower's face, he takes the precious seed and throws it and scatters it in the dirt because he believes in the harvest. Realizing that sowing and reaping involve not just techniques and principles, it involves emotions as well as faith. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever felt like soil is so hard that it wouldn't accept a seed? Or have you felt like people are, as a church, maybe historically we've technically, in terms of money, lived on more than 3 meals a day, but maybe you're strapped by money and you're limited physically or financially. There's value in learning. We need to trust God and be faithful in planting the seed in the present. God will be faithful in bringing in the harvest, just as he did in this psalm. So, I would suggest that this imagery is an effort to reinforce the notion of restoration and reversal. But even further, the idea that restoration takes time. No instant vineyards in this vineyard. It takes time. And when we plant those seeds, maybe with weeping, we have to trust that God will bring in the harvest. Our job is to plant. God's job is to reap. Now, I just want us to sing this song, Bringing in the Sheaves. And we're going to stand, and I'm going to get it back on the words. And we're going to sing it. If you don't know the tune, you'll get it by the second verse. Do you know it, Keith?
No, but I'll figure it out.
And I can help. Do you need the melody? Because I've got it right over there. Would that help?
I got it.
You got it? Okay, stand up, everybody.